day one for a new round of tariffs coming out of Washington. More than 90 countries have new rates. Of course, Canada's new 35% rate became active last week. And no word of when Ottawa and Washington will have a trade agreement in place. Let's go to Richard Forbes, principal economist at the Conference Board of Canada. He joins us to talk some more about this. Thanks for your time.
My pleasure.
Exports to the U.S. increased in June from the previous month, even as tariffs increased. Is the impact on Canada less than we feared, or are we just not really seeing it yet?
Well, we think that we're not really seeing the impact yet. So the tariffs up to now, they're really just targeting a few sectors, right? So we saw an auto tariffs get put on earlier this spring. Steel and aluminum have been targeted, and now copper, lumber are being added to the list as well. So the actual impact from the tariffs has been pretty acute to just a few sectors. Remember that, CUSMA compliant goods are still going south of the border tariff free. So that equals to about 85 or more percent of Canada's exports going to the U.S. are still tariff free. So up to now, the impact is still pretty modest, but we're going to have to wait and see what happens in the coming days and weeks.
Richard, where do you stand on how Canada has responded? Has it been appropriate? Has it been measured?
Well, I mean, we think so. I mean, what we're really happy to see is the federal government's commitment to circulating all the money that they collect from retaliatory tariffs throughout the economy. So the Prime Minister announced a $1.2 billion package for the softwood lumber industry a few days ago. And that goes on top of the, I believe it was $3 billion package for the auto industry announced earlier this year. So from that point of view, we're very happy with how the federal government has responded, collecting the revenue. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to wait and see how this shakes out. All the response, it's only as good as the final answer. So we're going to have to wait and see if the two countries can ultimately come to a deal.
How realistic are the other options Canada is trying to pursue, dropping the provincial barriers, for example, diversifying trade outside of North America, especially if Mexico doesn't see a need for an agreement just between the two countries?
Well, we think that should be a priority, and it's something that should have been a priority for the past number of years. So the provinces and the federal government, it looks like they're acting towards actually dropping the interprovincial trade barriers. Diversifying our trade away from the U.S. towards other countries is something else that we should have also been doing for many years. And these are realistic things that could happen, but it's important to note that it's not an overnight solution, right? So businesses are going to have to, kind of reorganize their supply chains. They're going to have to see which countries they should purchase from. So it's a long process, but something that we can get to eventually.
How much fallout should we expect from the new rates imposed on almost 100 countries around the world that kicked in today?
Well, the global economy, it certainly had a bit of a shock today when the rates did go in. It is important to note that the U.S., they've always been open to negotiating. They've always been open to potentially scaling back some tariffs if a country can agree to some sort of deal. So it's a bit of a shock. We're still optimistic that some sort of deals with these other countries will be made. We saw with Japan, with the EU. So we're hopeful for some other countries, and of course Canada. We're hopeful that they come to a conclusion to this soon.
Okay, so Canada is an outlier, China's an outlier, meaning both of them are still pursuing some sort of agreement with the U.S. Are they just more complicated relationships? What do you think stands out about these two countries that they might have in common?
Certainly, China, one of the biggest economies in the world. That's a very complicated situation there. It looks like the U.S., they've been wanting to kind of bring some of the manufacturing from China back to the U.S. So that's a complicated matter. Now, in terms of Canada and the U.S., we keep hearing from the Prime Minister that it's an economic and security deal. So there's things at play here other than just tariff rates. In terms of Canada and the U.S. specifically, we might see something surrounding security. There could be some other measures at play that we're not aware of yet that President Donald Trump would like to see from us. So yes, they are a little more complicated than some of the other trade deals we have seen.
Because we are still talking to the U.S. about this initial agreement and CUSMA comes up for renegotiation next year, do you think there will be a need for that CUSMA renegotiation?
Well, it certainly looks like it might be heading that way in terms of the CUSMA might need to get renegotiated earlier than next year. We keep seeing sectoral tariffs get added to Canada now with copper just recently. And I know a lot of analysts, including us at the conference board, were a little bit worried about other sectors being targeted and going beyond CUSMA there. So we're thinking that, the whole trade deal, that will probably be part of the whole negotiation with CUSMA next year. But again, it's anyone's guess. So we're just going to have to, buckle up and wait and see what happens.
What are the other sectors you are keeping a close eye on that perhaps you're worried about, beyond steel, beyond lumber, beyond aluminum vehicles?
Well, certainly, we were keeping an eye on the energy sector. That's something that's been mentioned that could eventually be targeted by the U.S. Other resources as well, agriculture. Potash is another really big resource, especially in Saskatchewan, that, American farmers rely on. So, between a bunch of these different resources, and then, of course, the manufacturing sector as well. We're just keeping an eye on everything, and we're going to have to see what happens if there's going to be additional tariffs imposed in the coming weeks.
Richard Forbes is a principal economist at the Conference Board of Canada. Thank you for your time today.